So we're live. Good morning, everyone. How is it going? It's a nice day, isn't it? It's going to be a great Thursday. And we are so grateful that you've taken time to be with us this morning. Happy birthday if it's your birthday, or if you're celebrating any kind of anniversary. I want to say happy birthday so much for joining us. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to be with you this morning and to be here to talk about the issues that matter. It's been quite the week here. It's been quite the week. I mean, the week is ramping up. We're approaching the 1st of September. So the Labor Day weekend is upon us. Is anyone tracking this stuff like people? So before you know it, it will be Halloween, right? My favorite holiday, and Thanksgiving. And then, oops, Christmas, birthday girl, and New Year's. And before you know it, another year is done. Oh, Lord. Something else. I kid you not, something else. So I just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone for joining us. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. Thank you for being a part of our experience and for so much that we're able to make it so that we can talk to you about the issues that matter. I'm aware that we all face issues. Yeah, we all face issues. My youngest daughter is now 17. When she was 2 years old, she met me on the stairs as I was coming home and said, "We all have issues." And she reminded me again when she turned 5 that we all have issues. So believe me, they're not, I mean, it must have been one of the few sentences that she could utter. Imagine making such a proclamation that she could say, "We all have issues." Like, seriously? Right? She was a little over 2 years old and she told me we all have issues. So we all have issues. Uh, and the thing about it is that it's just come. We're going to talk about fear today, how to handle fear and the fear of the future, right? How some of us fear the future as we approach things. It's these things happen. And there are a number of reasons for those fears. And sometimes your fears are quite legitimate, if you want to know the truth. Sometimes your fears do have a place, and they do come from a place where perhaps it's something to look into. So I want to talk about how to handle fear this morning and how to wrap it up, how to wrap around it, wrap your mind around it, and the various reasons why we face fear. What is fear? How does fear react in our bodies? So I want to talk about that. But I also want to talk about the news of the day. Here in Detroit, I might have mentioned yesterday that an 18-day-old baby was found in a bathtub. Well, they finally held the mother and charged her, as they should, right? As they should. It was kind of like ridiculous. Why were you even talking about that? Why were you even? How does an 18-day-old baby end up in a bathtub? How do you explain that? An 18-day-old baby is an infant. They can't move, they can't walk, they can't do anything until you do something for them. It amazes me. I don't know why people continue to have children or continue to have unprotected sex that results in pregnancy if you're not prepared to take care of the children that come from it. I don't get it. I do not get it at all. With all the issues, why would you bring a child into the focus? If everything isn't worked out, why are you going to bring a child into it knowing you can't take care of the child, knowing that you don't have the infrastructure to take care of the child or the support? It's mind blowing, mind boggling, and it just makes me wonder about that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? It just makes me wonder what was the motivation behind it. What were people trying to figure out when you bring a baby into the world and then after 18 days you put the baby in a bathtub and went to sleep and said, "Oh, I fell asleep, and when I woke up the baby was in the bathtub. I don't know how the baby got in there." Too bad. Just too bad, right? So the chicken wars are over with Popeyes and Chick-fil-A. Apparently Popeyes is the undefeated winner. Because Popeyes actually sold out of their chicken sandwich and took it off the menu. Took it off their menu. They're not going to sell it. Not for the foreseeable future. So Chick-fil-A, I guess, is going to continue to win because they won't have to take their chicken sandwich off the menu. Popeyes came in. and did a barbarian at the gate thing, made a lot of money, and they just kept it moving. Meanwhile, Chick-fil-A, who stays in the race, because you know how it said, you know the scripture that says the race is not given to the swift, but to those who endure. That's what Chick-fil-A did. They endure. So they will still be selling their chicken sandwiches. So I hope there's a Chick-fil-A in your area that you can drive to get it. Chick-fil-A is pretty good. If you're ever traveling, if you're out on the road traveling a lot from within the country, and Chick-fil-A is pretty solid. It's not going to leave a bad feeling in your stomach, because sometimes you eat fast food and only God knows what happens, right? But Chick-fil-A will just leave you breathless, right? So I just want to say thank you for that. Thanks a lot for that. So time is moving along, and we are approaching the end of the summer, which means that we are almost done with the third quarter of the year. So for those of you who have to get your monthlies and your quarters out, all the quarterly business reports were coming in just a few weeks ago, a week or two ago. And for those of you who still have those items on your vision board, everybody now has a vision board. And I'm like, are you doing anything about it? How about the vision board of your mind? I think that's the place to record everything, don't you think? Right? So for those of you who perhaps are wondering what next to do and where you're going to go after this, then it's time to make tracks, time to make a move on the plans that you have for the future. So I want to talk about how to handle fear. And briefly, I want to go into what fear is, because it's coming up around me. I mean, a very close friend of mine found herself in a situation that I didn't read properly. I couldn't identify the origin or the genesis of this feeling that she was having. I know that I spent some time with her, prayed with her, but for someone, I couldn't see that her problem was fear of the future. I couldn't see it manifesting as that, because this is someone who is vocal. This is someone who is strident, who is brave, and who has fought battles head on, who has combated and confronted some of the stuff in life. But sometimes that's what fear is. You don't see this one coming. Sometimes what takes us off track is the one you don't see coming. And I think this is the one for her. And I didn't see it because when the situation happened, I felt uncomfortable for her. I felt uncomfortable about it, and I expressed that. Maybe I shouldn't have, but I expressed that I wasn't satisfied with how the people close to her were handling it, and I expressed it to her. I tried to reach out to one of her family members, but they didn't return my call. In an effort to try to provide her with support, because I recognized at first that that's what she was looking for. But when the situation continued to happen, I recognized that she needed more than that. So I just showed up, right? So, and I'm going to be with her after the show is over. I'm going to go spend some time with her, because that's what the situation calls for. Who doesn't need support at a time like this? If it were me, I would want to know that my close friends are with me through this, right? So how to handle fear? Well, first we have to ask ourselves this question: what is fear? Because we really don't know. Sometimes we can't identify what we fear. I have found that fear is something that I don't know the outcome of. I'm confronted by a situation that is more powerful than I am, or a situation for which I lack resources, a situation for which I lack the wherewithal to solve it. Then I fear that situation. I fear the outcome or the consequences of what that situation is. Sometimes we can rationalize the situation, but what we really are terrified about is the consequences that come out of the situation. Sometimes, and especially for those of us, when you're young, you tend to look at it like, I can do anything, I can overcome it. It's no big deal. This answers the question that we all face. Why are so many young people going to jail? It's because when you're young, you think you can deal with it. You think, oh, that's nothing. It's a piece of cake. I can handle that. Until they actually find themselves in jail, spending time in jail. and can't get out of jail, and then realize how much they have wasted their youth. Fear can cripple you. You have to be careful with it, because sometimes looking at a situation, we tend to magnify the consequences. Sometimes they're not real. I agree with the saying that says fear is false evidence appearing real. Because sometimes you sit down, especially at night, you lay down and you think about situations and you do the what if scenarios. Anybody been there? You do the what if scenarios. I can believe you're nodding your heads. You look at the what if scenarios, and the consequences of those what if scenarios present the greatest challenge. That's what you fear the most. And so I just want to take a few minutes this morning to talk to you about the what if scenarios. What if? We spend so much time magnifying what if. What if this happens? And what if? And what ifs. By the time you wake up in the mornings, you have a knot in your stomach. Your perspective is so mired in fear that you can't even come out of it. And so the sum total of your fears have come up on you. Sometimes if you continue to think about something long enough, it has a way of manifesting. That's why you have to be careful what you think about. Be very careful what you spend your mind thinking about. If you want something good to happen, I encourage you to think on something good. Because if you sit down and you magnify the worst parts of something, I don't know how the chemistry of that works, but it tends to happen. So be careful what you think about. You know, they ever said, be careful what you wish for, be very careful, right? Think about positive things. Even when you are faced with the worst damning situation, be very careful what you say about it and be careful what you think about it. If some negative idea comes to your mind, nix it right away. Send it away. No, I'm not going to think like that. No, I'm going to continue to believe the good and the positive about the situation. And you speak it to yourself. You could be fearful about driving. How many of you have to drive for a living, but you are fearful about driving? You're fearful about driving on the freeways, the highways. You're not alone. Most of us won't admit it, but we have some hesitation because people are erratic drivers today. People are not conscious today. They spend more times on the screens in their cars and more times on the screens in their hands. So they're not paying attention, and then they overreact. I kid you not. I'm looking at some of the cars today, and the cars have a screen in the car, and it's not inverted. I like inverted screens. I don't like screens that are glass, that are up out of the car. To me, that's a situation that's a worst case scenario waiting to happen. If you have a fender bender and you hit something, the whole glass ends up in your face. But we're so happy to have a screen in our car. We think we're driving with all the technology that we're not looking at that situation. Some of you might have a fear of getting into an accident. You might fear flying. How many people have that fear? There are plenty of people who fear flying. Some people have never gotten on an airplane in their entire lives. Some people have never gotten on a cruise ship, will not sail on a cruise ship. I'm one of them. I got lost on one once and went back to port, and I'm not. It's not my thing. I'm just like, it's not land out there. So if something happens, they can't send a plane fast enough to get me off that boat. No, I'm not. I'm not going there. I'm not going down in that, right? Some of us fear water. Some people never swim because they fear water, fear of drowning, right? Seriously. Some people fear getting old. Hence, they're always at the plastic surgeon, tucking, tightening, pulling until there's nothing left. So they end up with a cat snarl. Some people fear getting old. Some people fear getting sick. Some people fear being alone, right? Some people fear being part of a couple. That's a real one, right? Some people fear childbirth. They won't get pregnant. They wait long and too long because somebody they know either died in childbirth or they had negative experiences associated with children, and they won't, right? Some people fear eating too much, overeating. Some people have so many fears, they overeat to compensate. And of course, there are some people who just fear the future, people who fear the likely outcome. You find that a lot with people who are getting older and people who sort of sit back and think, what will happen to me when I get older? What will happen to me when I get old? What will happen to me when I can't walk, when I can't talk, when I can't do this? That's what a living trust is about. That's what I say about that, right? Some people have been pronounced and been given a life sentence in terms of a sickness. The doctor has written an expiration date on you. Make no mistake about it. When they tell you you have 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months to live, that's a life sentence they have given you. And so people fear death. They're like, I don't know what will happen. They're not looking at death from the perspective of living, such as, well, what will happen to my relatives, or what will happen to my children or my spouse or the people left behind. You're fearing death. And I'm like, why you fear that? After you die, nothing happens. You don't have to worry about anything. It's over, right? So how do you handle these fears? That's really the question. That's really a challenge because it's individualized. There's some of us who have well-placed fears based on life experiences. Make no mistake about it. Some of the life experiences we have happen and they contribute and form a basis for fears to happen. And sometimes it's insidious. You can't even figure it out. So you're sitting there like, why do I have this unnatural fear about being abandoned or about being left alone? Why do I have this fear about aging? Why do I have this fear that I'll get sick? Why? Where does it come from? And you have to search yourself to find where that comes from. And when you do, you figure out and realize that it comes from something either somebody said or an associative experience. Associative in the sense that you watch someone else go through it and you start imbibing feelings from it that you, before you know it, you start agreeing with it. So you start thinking it might happen to you. No, rebuke that thing. Nix the idea. Send it away from you, right? That's how you handle it. You will find, here's what I say. At the end of the day, before you go to bed, pray and meditate. The last 20 minutes before you fall asleep, spend some time praying and meditating. As soon as you wake up in the mornings, as soon as you're conscious that you're awake, pray and meditate for good things to happen. Because what happens is, if you go to bed with a negative thought on your mind, that thing manifests in your dreams, and you wake up in the morning and it's the first negative thing you think about. If you find that that happens to you, we're human, nix it. Right? You look at associative fears. You look at someone else going through something. It might happen to your neighbor. They lost their job. And you start fearing, what if such a thing could happen to you? Makes no sense. You fear that. You plan for it. So there are some fears that you can plan around. It manifests like, what if you lose your job? Well, you say, well, I can get another job. I have enough money saved that can carry me through until I get another job. That's how you plan for that. You see what I'm saying? So you don't have to worry about your car payment, your house payment, insurances, and so on. You plan for that. There are some things that we can plan for. Nowadays, as soon as someone dies, everybody sees a GoFundMe page pop up. And some of us are like, man, I'm tired of giving to these situations. Well, what happened is people didn't confront their fears. Nobody ever thinks such a thing will happen to them. My thing is that's what life insurance is for. Buy some life insurance. Put some life insurance up. So if anything happens, they can pay for your burial and there will be some money left for your years and successes afterwards. Everybody should buy some life insurance. It's affordable. Buy it when you're young. Buy it now when you're in your 20s. Yes, you young people. So by the time you get to 50s, 60s, and 70s, you're paying less premium based on disease and aging and so on. And you will have something for your years and successors. Buy some life insurance. That's how you navigate around one of those fears. You fear life. Well, you fear living. I've heard of people who won't get out of their house. People who are confined to their homes because they fear getting out of their homes. Like seriously, they fear that as soon as they step out of the house, something bad will happen to them. That is real. The only way you're going to overcome that is to step out of your house. Because I guarantee you, That not every day you step out of your house, something bad will happen. I can guarantee that. In fact, you spend most of your days without something happening. Have you ever wondered about how the worst fears that you have never materialize? Have you ever wondered about that? What if your worst fears materialize? God help you. Why do you spend so much time dwelling on the negative? That's a negative scenario. Use your brain, your mind for more creative things. Exercise that part of your brain to execute, right? The executive functions, the cognitive functions. Use the part of your brain to help you develop and determine the best ways to go about stuff. Don't just sit there and let your mind just go to a negative place. Sometimes I find that we act out on our fears. We anticipate that something bad is going to happen, and in an effort to protect yourself, you jump into action to prevent the fear from happening. Sometimes people are driving terrified because they've been in an accident before, and they have a legitimate reason to fear the outcome of any accident. But you know what? Some things you're just going to have to do what? Ride through it. There's some things in life that we have no control over that you're just going to have to ride through it. And that is, my friends, how you deal with most of your fears. If you find yourself continually fearful, you need to talk to someone. There are some fears that are realistic, that you have put them down to concerns, such as if you lose your job, what are you going to do? Put that down as a concern rather than a fear. That's not a fear. That's a realistic situation that can happen. So you put it under the category of concern. Well, what do I do about my concerns? You have a fear of getting a disease. Well, what kind of diseases am I likely to be exposed to based on genetics? Do I need to adjust my diet? Do I need to adjust eating patterns? And some of you are saying, well, what if the disease comes anyway? Then it is what it is. It's a process of time. In other words, what I'm saying is it's fruitless to be fearful. See me wearing a necklace? It says fearless. I bought this necklace at a time in my life when everything around me was going south. And it seemed like nothing was ever going to go good. And I literally told myself, I'm going to have to ride this out and walk it out. I would be taken to places that I didn't trust or I didn't want to be there. But I'm going to have to trust God that He will hold my hand through it. There are some things that you have no choice but to ride out because it builds you up and it gives you experience. I could never really wear this necklace that says fearless. I have a bracelet that says fearless. I could not talk about fearlessness unless I had lived through some of the most fearful situations of my life. The uncertainties that surrounded my life at a particular particular moment in time, I had to live through those in order to make it. But I'm here today to tell you that you need to nix your fears. Say, nix your fears. Nix your fears. Sometimes we fear the fear, and you magnify it so much that the fear becomes bigger and greater than it really is. It's like people you've read about or heard about who hasn't stepped out of their homes in months and years. They're afraid. The fear has become greater than the original fear, which was they just feared walking outside and falling and slipping, or feared walking outside because they could have had an accident. Right? There is nothing, Eleanor Roosevelt said, there is nothing to fear but fear itself. For every situation, there is a response. For every problem, there is a solution. That's what you have to tell yourself. It makes no sense you sit down and itemize them. If I were to ask you today to sit down and write out all your fears, it would take a book. But can I also sit down and ask you to write out all the good things? That would take many books. So when you balance it out, the pros and the cons, fear loses. And that's how it has to be. You have to look at yourself and tell yourself that fear is not worth the time, the effort, and the energy and your attention. There is a place in your mind that is eaten away by fear. And fear grabs hold of your intestines and your innards and the inner workings of your gut and controls your responses to things. Have you ever noticed that when something is going to happen, you feel a drop in the pit of your stomach? That's your brain anticipating it's going to happen and sends out the sensors to your body. And that's how your body responds. Some people get the clammy hands. Some people will tell you they hyperventilate and get anxious when they confront a fearful situation. Some of us are like me, are more fearful of things that can't happen. So I'm like, well, what am I going to do about this? I tend to just be even keeled and just go through it. Sometimes you have to go through a series of situations to toughen yourself. You ever notice some people, that one little thing happens and they go ballistic? Well, there could be two reasons why. One, they have had a series of traumatic events, so that tipped them over, right? And two, some people have never faced anything. So they don't know what skill sets or what to do to deal with this situation. Do you see my point? You see where I'm coming from? So you've got to be a little bit more concerned. You have to focus on what is the fear. This is why I say, if you sit down, spend some time, ask yourself, what is it that I'm afraid of? What is it that compels me? What is it that warps my thinking so that I can't be whom I'm supposed to be? I have no issues with violence or the threat of violence. There was a time in my life when I lived with violence, so much so now that I have trouble that comes, but do I fear it? No, to be calm. Do you see what I'm saying? Sometimes that's what is required. You develop your muscle, you develop your faith, and you develop the muscle and you to be still so you can deal with it. Life is like that, right? I'm not here to tell you that sometimes everything is going to be hunky-dory, good and pleasing, and you can sit back and everything is fine. No, life is not always a bag of chips, and life is not always a bunch of chocolates, and every day is not Sunday. There are rainy days. There are cloudy days. There are days when it rains and rains and rains. There are days when it thunders. There are days when there are earthquakes and volcanoes. There are days when all the stuff that could happen just gets poured out. But correspondingly, there are also good days. Everybody has good days and bad days. There are good days when good things happen to you. Come on now. When you can smile, when you can realize you can still move your legs and you can still move your hands and you can still think. Sometimes when confronted with a fearful situation, you have to think your way through it. You have to be positive. It's a challenge. But I promise you, if you think your way through it, you can think your way through it. I promise you that it does work. And there are some days when suddenly your fears are realized. And you will find that it's not really something to fear because you knew this was going to happen and you have a remedy. You have a way out of it. So it's not a fear. You have overcome that. Sometimes fear going to the doctor. I don't know about you, but I turned 52. And suddenly going to the doctor, which was usually an experience for me to just be like, whatever. Suddenly I'm going to the doctor and I'm like, are you okay? Is everything okay? Right? I realize that I'm having some concerns in that area. So I hasten to reassure myself. Well, you stay away from stress, you work out, you eat right, you drink water, you don't do anything, you don't drink, you don't smoke, the drugs, that kind of stuff, so that I can deal with driving to the doctor. And especially when they say they're going to do your blood work. And this is you. Okay, because the blood tells everything. Right? Or you have to go to the dentist. Who fears the dentist? As a kid, I feared the dentist. I thought they were horrible because they used to do horrible things in my mouth that made me hurt. So I find as an adult, this is me going to the dentist, okay? Because they can look in your mouth and look at your teeth and tell if there's a disease pending. Like they can see diabetes, high blood pressure, and so on. They can see it from looking at your teeth. So this is me going to the dentist. Smile. Open your mouth. All right. Oh, there's no one, right? Because now I'm like, darn it. And the other day, my doctor had to say, you know what? You're listening to all this stuff that is telling you, and it's not true. It might not even be true for you. Have you ever found that? It might be true for someone else, but not for you. Right? Some of you fear driving into the neighborhood you grew up in. That's a real fear because it doesn't look the same, and the same people don't live there anymore, and they probably will fire gunshots at you. That is a life situation. That's not a concern. That's a life thing. You probably should avoid the area. Right? Right? I know I'm trying to make fun of it here. People like me, I fear driving on the east side of Detroit. Like this morning, I had to drive on the east side to get to where I was going. So I had to drive through the east side. And I kid you not, 8 Mile East. There's a pothole there just between, I think it's between DeQuander and Van Dyke, I want to say, where the train tracks are. Dude, I fear that. The other day, the car dropped into it, and I thought the whole thing, I said, did I get hit? I thought the car had been hit. I dropped in a pothole. I fear that. That's something reasonable to fear. Potholes on the east side of Detroit. Fix the damn roads, Governor Whitmer. Fix the damn roads, Mayor Dugan. Come on now, right? That's a legitimate reason to fear driving on the east side because the potholes are undefeated. Yes, the potholes are like, they're like a beast that takes a chunk out of your tire. I thought the whole car was gone. I took it seriously, I took it to the mechanic yesterday, like, is everything okay? Because it felt like the car had fallen into this metal hole. I mean, the thing, I drove past it again this morning to look at it and my eyes widened, right? So that's a legitimate fear of potholes. For trauma victims who have been exposed to violence, they fear violence. That's part of the trauma. Reenacting the violence, right? Then re-energizing it. That's why sometimes when people have gone through traumatic situations, don't ask them to tell the story, because retelling of the story is bringing back the trauma. You ever wonder why people cry when they're telling the story? It's the remembrance of the trauma, right? Sometimes don't ask people, just hold their hands and say, I'm with you. Just hold their hands and say, I am here. Because sometimes asking people, a few years ago, I had given my story of how I had been sexually violated at 6 years old. And the preacher whose church I was in, we're sitting at a table eating, and he's asking me again. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable discussing that. Because it was reigniting the trauma. I kid you not. I know he had nefarious intentions. He probably was imagining having sex with me. You know how people can be, right? But I was a 6-year-old child at the time. So retelling the story is reigniting the trauma. So when you see it manifesting as fear, it's the fear connected to the trauma that occurred. And so we have to be more sensitive, right? Some people are fearful. Nowadays, you have people are emerging, choosing their gender identity. It's their choice. It's their body. They have autonomy over it. I may not like it. You may not like it. It is what they choose to do. The problem is they keep pushing it onto a society that is not ready for it. People are not ready to accept that. And so a lot of them are encountering all kinds of pushback. They're encountering all kinds of situations that are causing them to be fearful. But the question is, you might want to live like that, but don't try to convert someone else to your point of view and force it on them and say, well, you have to live with it because this is how I am. No, they're going to tell you no, right? Sometimes people have unnatural fears. The fear of foreigners, for instance, xenophobia, right? Misogyny, the fear of women, the people fear women and the power of women. These are all fears that manifest themselves in today's diaspora, in today's world. And so when you look at it, you have to ask yourself, well, where did all this fear come from? Where's all this stuff coming from? And it's because people do have legitimate concerns that go unaddressed. I find that if you have a situation that keeps coming up in your mind, rationalize it out. Think it through and rationalize it and put it where it belongs. If it is something for you to be fearful of, well, that's a situation you have to confront and deal with. But if it is something that just presents itself as just a haphazard thought that just floats, well, deal with it like that. So unpack it and put it away. Unpack your fear. Say, unpack your fear. We all need to learn to unpack our fears. Some people fear being attacked again after 9/11. I know that most of us, I kept looking up towers. I didn't go in a tall building in downtown Orlando or in Daytona Beach or in Miami. I lived in Orlando at the time for a long, long time. I did not go in a tall building. And surprisingly, before 9/11, the year before, I had gone into the World Trade Center towers in New York. So 1 year later, when they went down, I was like, I don't know that I'm going to be in a tall building for a long time. Right? That's a fear. That's a fear. Is it legitimate? Yes. It comes from reenacting the trauma of watching something terrible happen. Some of you are fearful of violent situations. You probably need to go back into your experience and figure out why, when people start arguing, it makes me react this way. It could just be that you were a child and witnessed violence enacted before you to someone and you couldn't do anything about it. You were powerless. So now you can't avoid it. It comes up and you react the way you do. Right? So here's a couple things as I close today. I got to go to bear in mind. Fear is an acronym. It means false evidence appearing real. Believe me, for every problem, there is a solution. Sometimes you just have to fight your way through the solution. If you fear losing your job, well, have backup plans. Put aside some money. But you can't live in that fear. It will destroy you. That tension every day as you go to work will destroy you. If you fear your boss at work, your boss is not God. Your boss is not all powerful. Rationalize it. That's a person who got up this morning and had to use the bathroom and had to brush their teeth so their breath wouldn't stink all day. If that helps you, think about it like that. Right? There is no need to fear any human being. They're just another human being. Right? Rationalize it out. Right? If you woke up this morning and you had to go to the doctor and you feared the report of the doctor, you need a lot of faith to believe that all things are going to work out for your good. And even if the doctor's prognosis comes back not what you expect it to be, you have to still rationalize it. Start making some plans. Start saying some things. Makes no sense you fear it because inevitably what is to be will be. You see what I'm saying? If you have fear of getting old, you fear that no one will be around to care for you because you never had children or you had never gotten married. This is a conundrum that's facing a lot of people who were homosexuals in their youth. They had never settled down. They never had children. And now that they're getting older, they find themselves, where are they going to be? They end up in senior facilities and so on where people mistreat them. Do you see what I'm saying? Is that a legitimate fear? Well, you got to make a plan. All of us, if you live long enough, you're going to get old. So you make a plan for it. Stop doing some of the things you do. Don't spend every penny. Put some money aside. Some people are retiring. I don't think we all have a retirement. And how long is it going to last? You save $200,000-$300,000. How long will that last? Right? Right? Fear. You fear you might, the other day I was reading something hilarious on Twitter. Well, it wasn't hilarious, and the Michigan State Police had done some crackdown on the freeways. Anybody around here in Metro Detroit? Well, if you live outside of Metro Detroit. And they gave a breakdown of the infractions. And one of them they caught like 3 fugitives. So I was like, a fugitive? What's a fugitive doing driving? If it were me, I wouldn't be driving. I'm just saying. I mean, it was just something. And I'm like, that was a totally fearless person. They didn't fear anything, right? You have to think about it. Sometimes you have to inject some humor. And I kid you not, when you start rationalizing what you fear, you know what you begin to realize? It's not as big as you thought it was. It's not as big a problem. as you thought it was. The problem most of us have is that we magnify these things. And sometimes it's legitimate. Like in my father's family, people have been dropping dead since the year began. And so one of my nieces actually asked her mother, who's my sister, actually asked her, well, do you ever think you're next? And when my sister posed it, I said, dang. I said, wow, that's a legitimate concern that that child has. It's a fear she has of losing her mother. That means it's something she probably thinks about, especially as she gets older. She tends to think her mother is getting older. So what if all these folks are dying? And her mother had to say, it is what it is. I can't control it. If it is to be, it is. You know what I mean? And she had to say, I make plans and so on. Do not let fear occupy and build up a space in your heart or in your mind. Anything that is of concern to you right now, nix it, confront it. One of the best things you can do is confront, why do I feel the way I do about the situation? And when you confront it, you begin to realize that it's not that big a deal in the first place. There's some things in life we all have a road to walk, we all have to go through. All you can do is pray Godspeed and pray that your faith and have faith and a purpose in your heart and some gratitude in your heart that you will make it through it. Because sometimes that's all we have. And my friends, that's all I have today. I have a friend whom I have to go and give some comfort to right now. She's facing that situation. And I get it. I didn't get it before. I get it. And it's hard for her, a strong person who has been there for so many others, to find herself being vulnerable. And yet here she is. We all have issues. And if fear is one of your issues, confront whatever it is that's promoting that fear, nix that idea, and deal with it. Send it away from you, because you've got to live your life free. Live fear free. Live free of fear. All of us deserve to live free of fear. So if you find it crowding your thoughts, nix it. Send it away. Godspeed, right? Be blessed, everybody. Today's Thursday. I'll see you tomorrow. Go to my website, harrietkemick.com. Remember, I write books. Your books help me to stay alive. You buying my book, Through the Fire, helped me to stay alive. Go to my website, theexodusfoundation.com. That's where we provide services to victims of trafficking. Help us, send a donation to us. We're a 501c3 corporation. We're duly registered with the IRS. So make sure that all your donations to the Exodus Foundation are tax deductible. Go to Amazon, just Google Harriet Kemick's books, and you can find my books. They're translated into a million languages around the world, a myriad of languages around the world. If you live in Turkey, you live in India, you live in Pakistan, wherever you live, and you request my book to come to you from Amazon or Barnes & Noble, they will translate it into the language that you choose. So go to my website, harrietkemick.com, invite me to speak, right? Invite me somewhere where you think others will benefit from what I have to say, as well as go to the Exodus Foundation. It's been fun talking to you about this topic. And I bless you, and I see you next time. Bye, everybody. Be blessed. Have a great Thursday, right? Make it a terrific Thursday, right? How about that? How about that? How about that? Thanks, everybody, for being a part of my experience this morning. I'm so grateful you took the time to be with me.